Testing. Test a little bit more. How's that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I know even more numbers if you want me to keep going. Good. All right. All right. Okay, I think we're ready to start. So thank you all so much for coming along. Really appreciate it. Let me just tell you a little bit about myself first, so you know who I am. My name is Steve Mort. I'm the host and executive producer of Newsnight, which airs on Friday night at 8:30 on WUCF TV. That's the PBS affiliate public television station that serves Central Florida. We sort of talk about the week's news. And one of the things that we as journalists often talk about, in fact, is AI and how it affects what we do. So I'm kind of excited to hear what others here on the panel think. Today, we're going to talk about what lies ahead for public policy when it comes to sort of the inexorable development of artificial intelligence and how it affects career paths and the workforce that students studying here at UCF and elsewhere, of course, are preparing to enter. As many here will know, in the business and academic worlds, both are trying to figure out how this rapidly emerging technology can be addressed, both in terms of the opportunities and challenges that it presents. For us in journalism and the news media field, AI presents sort of an existential challenge, I would say, to our industry in a number of ways. Firstly, in the determination of what is real and verifiable and what is simply AI-generated disinformation. And secondly, for our industry, the challenges can mirror those in other fields as well. For example, what impact will AI have on our workforce and our products? How much will AI be integrated into our workflows? How do we detect copy that's written by AI, for example? Should news organizations use AI to improve efficiencies and reduce labor costs even further than they already have? And what are the ethical considerations that journalists should be concerned about with AI? They're all questions that we have. So the questions remains for my industry and the rest of the economy. How can we make sure workers have the necessary skills and training to deal with AI? And how do we ensure economic growth remains inclusive and equitable as technology plays a larger and larger role in our world? Policymakers, in fact, both at the federal and state level, face key decisions on how to regulate AI. Here in Florida, the state legislatures looked at several different proposals to keep generative AI under control. And this past session, as some of you may know, lawmakers passed a bill to require disclaimers on AI-influenced political ads, which of course is really important as we come into election season. Well, we have a panel here today to discuss the policy implications of integrating AI into the labor market and what it will mean for career trajectories and how policymakers, legislators, and business leaders, and of course job seekers as well, there'll be many of you here at UCF should respond. So I'm going to ask each of our panelists to introduce themselves. I'll start with Dr. Amanda Pacheco.
Hi, everyone. Hi, my name is Dr. Amanda Pacheco. I am a professor here. I teach in the interdisciplinary studies area. I also teach leadership classes. And my career has, it's gone back since, I would say probably about the year 2000, 1999, I started getting also interested in workforce development initiatives. And so I've always kind of blended the two, where even in my courses, I tend to talk about how is it that we get out there into the workforce? What does that look like? And so when I was asked to be part of this panel, I was really interested in doing so.
And Lewis Mitchell.
Good afternoon, everybody. Oops. I started my career about 9 years ago in the financial services industry. I work as a full stack engineer for BNY Mellon, and I work within the anti-money laundering space. So we try to catch the bad guys. I'm specifically on the IT side, and we've been deploying automation techniques, machine learning techniques, and now generative AI techniques to make us more efficient in that space. So like yourself, I was also interested in kind of talking about where AI will take us, what it's going to do for you, the folks such as yourselves, and the industry leaders like ourselves.
Melissa Stiers.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be back at a university. I built my career in higher ed in the Washington, D.C. area for about 10 years. I was the traveling chief of staff for the George Washington University president. We had a very big international focus, so I led about 60 delegations to over 35 countries around the world, which really gave me a huge love of just the international landscape. And currently, I am working for MIA, Mission Impact Academy. We are a public benefit corporation set to upskill 1 million non-technical women and talent in AI and emerging tech by 2030. So this panel is super exciting. I don't feel worthy to be on the stage with these brilliant people, but I'm so happy to be here with you all today.
I definitely don't feel worthy either. And I think via Zoom, we have Dr. Stephen Kubler, also from UCF. Stephen, are you there? Hello, do you hear me, Stephen? Dr. Stephen Kubler, also from UCF. Stephen, are you there? Well, we seem to be having a couple of difficulties there, but we'll press on while we iron out the sound problems, and then we'll come back to Dr. Kubler in a moment. So let me just first of all start off with a big picture question to all of you guys. Given the rapid advancements in AI and its potential to disrupt traditional businesses and business models, how do you sort of envisage the future of the kind of work that you guys do and the work of the industries that you're in?
My research group works at the interface of chemistry and material science and optics and physics kind of all mulled together. And in short, we try to improve materials for making devices that have good optical function, and we also use lasers to actually fabricate three-dimensional structures that have novel optical function. And then in the ethics center, we have a number of activities that we're engaged in. We're really trying broadly to help cultivate cultures of ethics across the institution, which is for all stakeholders, faculty, students, and administrators, and the community that we serve. But broadly, we're trying to help people understand some of the tools that we have, particularly frameworks for understanding challenging ethical problems. And that includes those posed by new emerging technologies, including artificial intelligence. So again, thanks very much for having me, and I'm looking forward to some of the discussion and questions. Thank you.
All right, well, we just have Dr. Kubler with us now. So let me just re-ask that first question for his benefit. Let's start with the big picture question. Given the rapid advancements in AI and its potential to disrupt traditional businesses, I wonder how you envisage it changing the kind of work that you do and the industries, the kind of work that your industries do. Let me start with you.
Sure. So, of course, in education, we're all here, right? And we're using this AI, maybe not. We're admitting to using the AI, maybe or maybe not, right? And so I talk with a lot of students. I'm actually polling my students right now anonymously to find out actually what is the usage factor going on in education. I'm part of a lot of conversations right now statewide about the use of AI in higher ed in particular. And it seems that the landscape is split, right? So there's some professors that are very pro AI, and they're thinking that this really can be a helpful thinking tool and a brainstorming tool and an editing tool. And then, of course, there are some that are a little more leery. They're concerned that it might actually inhibit students' ability to think and to learn and to write. And so it's really interesting to be part of these conversations. I'm unabashedly on the side of pro AI. I see it as a real help, kind of a playing field leveler, if you will, especially for students with learning differences. I see a lot of my students who deal with anxiety, ADHD, having that blank page phenomenon, and it really just helps to put something on the page that they can start with. And I also see it helping my students who struggle in reading, because they're able to potentially put some information into AI, have it distilled down to a reading level that they can more easily comprehend, and then they're actually able to move forward in their studies.
It seems like the discussion in the education field with AI is the one area where it's playing out in public view, right? I mean, we see the news from higher education institutions, how they're trying to work through AI. Lewis, what do you think?
So just to provide a little bit of context, within my business, within our industry, the name of the game is volume.
Yeah.
So the systems that we deploy within our bank generate anywhere from 3,000 to 4,000 alerts, work items per month, and those items are worked by people. So some of the tasks that are involved in completing these items are quite monotonous, quite tedious, and just quite frankly take up a lot of time. And when you're trying to analyze thousands upon thousands of rows of transactions, it can be a bit much. So we will try to leverage AI to help us surmise this information, whether it be customer demographic information, account transactional information, and things of that nature. I think it's here to stay, but it's a double-edged sword, because the fear is that, the benefit is you gain speed, hands down. The fear is that the quality of some of this research will lessen. And what if you have hallucination mistakes? I'm sure some of you individuals are familiar with that. So I think that's
hallucination mistakes. What do you mean?
So gathering. So with AI, you're gathering hallucination is making up answers from out of context information, depending on where you're pulling the data from. If it's isolated to only that. But this is a more in-depth discussion. But I hope that answered your question.
Interesting. Yeah, Melissa.
I'm excited, and it's scary to say this at a university setting, but I'm really excited about micro-credentialing. I'm excited about the idea that you can go to a program for 6 weeks and upskill and not have to be in debt $15 billion for a master's degree that maybe or maybe you don't need, So I am really, really excited about the opportunity that it's going to give people that are young, people that are middle-aged, people that need to advance in their careers, and also globally. I'm excited that, going back to kind of, I don't want to say it's a level playing ground, but my goodness, I think this is a time where things are about as level as they're ever going to get. And so I think that that's really something to be optimistic about. And so that's what's got me excited. One of the things.
Trying to keep it that way, I guess.
Yeah.
Dr. Kubler, what do you think?
Soon with AI, he'll be able to hologram into this, so it'll all be easy. Just a couple, couple years.
The irony of the technical problems.
I think there's
here.
lots of excitement and opportunity about artificial intelligence, and it's important to keep in mind there's several sectors of understanding of what AI is, depending upon whether you're, say, a computer scientist and in the thick of it, or whether you're in science and technology and maybe more of a user of it and therefore have some familiarity, but maybe don't know entirely everything that's under the hood of an AI tool. And then there's the lay public, which may not be aware that artificial intelligence is something that conceptually has been developing since the 50s, that algorithms and tools and even programming languages emerged since the 80s. But there's really been an explosion of AI consciousness. I don't mean that AI is conscious, but we're conscious of its impacts and thinking ahead about some of the social impacts. That's part of the lay public's understanding because of the emergence of ChatGPT and other so-called large language models. And AI encompasses now in the public vernacular so many different things, some of which have been in use for quite some time, things like regression models and machine learning. And different elements of artificial intelligence are used for different things depending upon the task and the tool. So in my field, in optics and photonics and physics writ large, lots of people are using artificial intelligence, maybe not without understanding exactly what it is, myself included. We have a grant from the Air Force to try to design novel meta-optics that can give you enhanced optical performance. And we're building some artificial intelligence tools using honestly fairly simple code. It does not take a tremendous amount of coding to build up a generative AI system. And I will say that, as is common, we see that some students are way ahead of the curve. I judge science fair competitions, and I will say that for the last 3 years, there's almost always been in the Nelson Ying competition, at least 2 or 3 people, 2 or 3 high school students who are using artificial intelligence tools for things like image recognition and think medical diagnostic tools. And a lot of these tools are available for download through GitHub and other public source sites where you can download the code and begin using it in a fairly sophisticated way, again, without understanding everything that's under it. So there's different levels of use, and some people, I think, could mistakenly proclaim that they're using a lot of AI, but if you don't really understand what's going on, that can be problematic. And then others could have a sense that using AI necessarily makes a person an expert, but that's similar to saying that someone who drives a car knows everything about the vehicle and how to repair it. There's different levels of understanding and consciousness about the problem. And really, it seems to have exploded onto the public sphere with ChatGPT, even though elements of AI have been around for quite some time, growing very rapidly in sophistication. If I have concerns, my concerns are that some people get left behind, that it's a new tool that we can add to our arsenal to attack some really sophisticated problems. But as with using any tool, you really have to understand how the tool works. And if we think back over history, there have been lots of emerging technologies where naysayers and Luddites have brought fearful prognostications of bad outcomes. That calculators would mean that people don't know how to do math. And there's some substance to it, honestly. This is one of the concerns in teaching, that you can have some students who are using a calculator to solve mathematic problems, on their way through a chemistry course or a physics course. And if they don't have a visceral understanding of the mathematics, they can punch numbers into the calculator and get a result and believe the result without having some sense of what the result should be, right? And that's dangerous. We want to understand generally how things work and then take advantage of technologies to do the things we could do, say, by hand much more speedily and perhaps with greater accuracy. But part of that accuracy really depends upon knowing how the tool works. And so very long ago, with the emergence of computer technology, the term GIGO was coined, which means garbage in, garbage out. If you put junk into an AI model, as with any computational tool, you get junk out. And if you don't understand how the tool can be used for your particular problem, you're not going to be able to get a sophisticated result. And that could lead to real social harms, okay, in many different fields. So I think, unpacking all of that, what it really means is that there's a professional and an ethical responsibility across all of these different disciplines that are going to use AI to make sure that students, that emerging professionals are really tasked with understanding how AI tool works. And what I would say is, yes, it's a tool, but remember, as a user, as a company employing these tools, you are 100% responsible for the outcome. So we need to address some of these ethical concerns by understanding or by adopting the posture that regardless of how the tool works and regardless of how sophisticated it is, whatever it gives you, you as the user, as the company, as the representative are responsible for it. And what that does is, I think it turns the table from being replaced by a tool to one of empowerment, where now the user is in the driver's seat and we can be less concerned about jobs being destroyed if we think about it is a job creator, but a job creator where people have to have a sophisticated understanding of how the tool is used. And so, I don't know if that necessarily shortens times to degrees or if it adds more things to degrees that students have to, learn. But it is an emerging tool, and as with any tool, you're responsible for how it uses. And that's kind of the ethical position that we're advancing in the Center for Ethics, or at least I am. So I'll end there with that.
Well, those that use AI, of course, are responsible, but sometimes there do need to be public policy interventions to make sure things go as smoothly as possible when it comes to these sort of emerging technologies. And I wanted to ask you guys what you think in terms of what public policy interventions might be needed to sort of ensure a smooth transition for workers as AI becomes more widespread in the economy. And I guess in education, that's one area where public policy could certainly do with some catching up, but also could be useful.
Sure. Yeah, I think with any new thing like this, certainly some policy around it can be helpful. I agree with what Stephen was saying on the screen, where he was saying that there needs to be the oversight. As I was considering some of these questions before coming here, I was thinking about doctors and lawyers and financial advisors using these tools, right? And I mean, even now, we could put in our symptoms into ChatGPT and get a potential differential diagnosis, right? We might be able to figure out what's ailing us. And if doctors are using these tools, and if there are apps that are becoming developed to be able to offer these kinds of insights into our health, or legal issues or financial issues, things that we could absolutely be taken for better or for worse. I think that there does need to be some oversight by people who have that expertise in those areas, rather than just deploying an app to give us information that might really do us harm.
Lois, what do you think? Because I can imagine that AI would be kind of thrown into the complex financial services world, could be tricky. But also it's a world that maybe legislators and policymakers don't necessarily have a good handle on. I wonder what the sort of challenge, what kind of public policy interventions might help your industry, and what the challenges of building those might be.
So I think, simply said, there are a lot of regulations within our industry, and I think that's going to slow down the production of AI a little bit, but not much. So in order to get some of these things passed, something as simple as traditional machine learning algorithms, as the doctor was describing, it took years to get that implemented, and we're just now starting to break that. So I think proper training, proper communication, model refinement, model review is going to be very important. Again, I think it's going to take a little bit of time to fully put these things into production. So, again, just to piggyback, oversight is needed. How that happens, that's going to be dynamic. That's going to be a very complex issue, and I think the leaders of our groups will have to be ready to face that challenge.
What do you think, Melissa?
So I'm going back to, I'm excited because we are having these AI ethics conversations now all over the world. I was at the UN for the CSW 38, which is where women around the world get together, and they were talking specifically about how to protect children and how to protect women and what does that look like. And I think different than what happened in the MySpace, Facebook era, Instagram, where they're catching up now and we're watching it play out on Congress now, where we're just, all these things that should have been implemented never were. I think that we are at least a little bit ahead of the curve, because these conversations are happening as the AI and as this innovation is coming to fruition, at least to the broader audience, right? We know it goes back to 1951. I have a friend who has a photo of himself in 1991 when he came to the US working on AI. But I'm excited because I think that we are still in the conversation, and we have a chance to lead it and put these regulations in, versus catching up to we've already destroyed our youth and we have mental health issues and everything from everything that social media did to us. I think that once again, we're a little bit ahead of the curve in terms of what we can get in place, and get it in place sooner rather than later.
I think Dr. Cooper is on a slight delay, so bear with him while the message gets through to him. But I was wondering what you think, Stephen, in terms of public policy interventions. What do you think?
Well, I think it's difficult for any one individual to advocate for structures. Thinking about development of public policy really requires conversation among all stakeholders. Of course, legislators we might think of as developing policy, but some of the best policy comes from professional organizations who have the expertise and the wherewithal to think forward about implications. At the same time, we function in a democracy, and democracies have the challenge of sometimes moving slower than we want, but they tend to avoid some of the worst mistakes, or can, specifically because they involve conversations among multiple stakeholders. So what that means to me is that we don't simply surrender policymaking to legislators, nor do we surrender policymaking just to scientists. Instead, we all participate in that conversation. And to be part of that conversation means we have a lot more activities like this.
Yes.
We really start educating ourselves, whether you're using AI or not. When we reduce it down to maybe the singular most important function as members of a democracy, we vote. So we can decide how policy moves forward by thinking about how we vote and who we vote for, and are the people that we vote for thinking about these problems, and are we being responsible participants in the democracy by taking the time to educate ourselves and engage in the conversations. So we're in a rushed society. We have very valuable uses of our time that we devote ourselves to, like friends and family. Sometimes we squander on opportunities, myself included, wasting time on social media and whatnot. But we should put forth a little more effort to sometimes devote effort to understanding some of these emerging technologies, participating in some of these more complex discussions, being willing to engage in things like ethical discussions, which don't give you just an answer of what that public policy should be. Instead, they entertain discussion of values where you find across all stakeholders in a democracy, all stakeholders in, say, the coordinates that involve the user of a technology, the generator of a technology, the consumers that buy a product, all of those different spaces, we discuss what are the values. For the consumer, it might be safety or data protection. For a company, it might be generation of sales. And for a legislator, it might be facilitating both so that you have stable economic development. And those literally involve different and competing values. You can be extremely safe by having zero risk, right? We could be totally safe from motor vehicle accidents by never driving a motor vehicle, but we end up balancing those competing values by saying, all right, well, I'm going to operate a motor vehicle, but maybe I want my motor vehicle to be a little more expensive and have safety features like airbags. And in fact, maybe I'll make sure that I'm trained, that I pay attention to the regulations, and that I don't go through a stop sign just because it's late at night and I look both ways and I don't see any traffic. So it's okay for me to decide whether I'll follow rules or not. These are responsible patterns of behavior that involve thinking about implications of our choices. And some of those choices are thinking about whether we're going to remain silent in this conversation or whether we're going to actually do the diligent work as individuals to understand what the emerging technology is and what other factors are that are affecting our society, and then participate in those conversations, understand what the competing values are, figure out what kind of risk we're willing to balance in order to meet the different competing values. And some of that distills down to just voting, but a lot of it distills down into very active social engagement. So, it brings me full circle to say I really appreciate, as other members of the panel have said already, I really appreciate this opportunity to talk about this. And I appreciate the members of the audience for coming and listening to, what are weighty issues. It's really good that we do this and bring more people to this table.
And I think we'd probably all agree that pulling those stakeholders together to kind of make those decisions as a society is important. How that's done, of course, is another question. I wanted to talk a little bit more about the labor market in particular, and how AI streamlines can streamline repetitive tasks, automation, the decision-making process and things like that. Do you think this kind of automation is freeing up workers to focus on other kind of more strategic things, or is it being used, or is there a danger of it being used to simply reduce costs, sort of to do away with humans in various industries, or both? I mean, what do you think we're seeing? What about education? What do you think?
Sure. I think a little bit of both. I definitely think that by reducing some of the repetitive tasks that Lewis was mentioning, I think that does open us up to offering more creative, innovative approaches. I can definitely see more entrepreneurship coming through with having, basically free labor if you're able to use the AI to be able to do some of those tasks that would need to be done. I think that there is the risk, of course, of reducing that human element. I can absolutely see the need for empathy and compassion to be more explicitly needed / taught, perhaps. I think we see that already. Some of the AI applications that we're seeing, with the phone systems, right? We call into a business and, press 1 for this, press 2 for this, press 3 for this. You're spending a half hour talking to a machine trying to get to a human, right? And so some of the more front-running companies, customer service-oriented companies, are actually doing with less of that and actually giving you a human to talk with. And so I think there's going to be a balance there. I think in terms of leading innovation by reducing some of these repetitive tasks. I think we can look to history. I know when we came out of the fields and started to be able to automate some of those kinds of things, art and literature and music actually went up, right?
Yes.
And so I think this does give our society an opportunity to increase the amount of creativity that we're able to do and to use. But I think we have to be careful with how we employ it.
What do you think, Lois? I mean, is it simply a tool to let people do things better in your industry, or will it sort of fundamentally change how the labor market works in your business?
I definitely think it's going to be a tool that's going to be leveraged, but I agree. I'm going to piggyback on something that you said and something that you said. It's both.
Yeah.
So the repetitive tasks will undoubtedly be minimized, but that's going to allow our individuals and our employees and our coworkers to become specialized.
Yes.
Fortunately for our industry, we have a big box of tools that we can leverage, and we don't use them because we're so inundated with work. This will allow that to open up. And then I think you mentioned, I was thinking about this, the social media thing, and how that's, I don't know if any of you have experienced this, but there's been like a little bit of a problem with social media at points, and not to hate on it. I'm just saying, we have lessons learned. So I think with AI, again, to piggyback, we have this ability to now identify problems from afar and kind of put parameters in place to kind of mitigate the risks a little bit. Yeah.
I'm really interested in your line of work, especially sort of international protocol and that kind of thing. What do you think about what AI kind of means for the workforce, and things that you're involved with?
So I just agree with everything they're saying, but I have a really cool quote that I wrote up. Thank you, ChatGPT. And to go back to your London roots, just as C.S. Lewis, he went behind the wardrobe for innovation and creativity. AI allows us to unlock new realms of creativity by taking the tasks that tether us to tedium. AI liberates our minds to wander, to wonder, and to create without bonds. I wanted to say that. I think it's amazing. And I agree with the balance, Mandy, that you were saying. I want to give a real use case. One of my colleagues, he was consulting with I believe it was an insurance firm or a law firm, and it was taking 8 people to, the insurance would kick back the submissions to say this was wrong, that was wrong, and it was literally taking these 8 employees to go through it and find the words and all of that and yada yada, and took 8 manpower of eight people. Well, they implemented this AI tool to fix it, and ended up going to reduce to 2 people that needed that. The other 6 people did not lose their jobs. They were elevated into sales position, and it actually produced more revenue for the organization, and it was better for the employees. So going back to the point of optimism and hope, I think that there is a chance for get you out of the weeds. It doesn't mean you're totally pushed away. To Mandy, to your point, it's, does the leader have empathy and to understand where that bottom line is coming from, and how that this is, not only are we going to save money by reducing this, we're going to actually increase money. That is super cool. So I see that as a really great tool. And I think, Mandy, also to your point, the human to human element, we cannot, AI, at least I think in my lifetime, AI will not be able to replace true empathy, true understanding, where what we put into the technologies. And so we are always going to need that. I hate that we call them soft skills, because that's what I'm best at. I'm not good at the hard skills. So I think we're always going to need those. And that's why, to Lewis's point, yes, we're going to have different things that come up, but the human element is going to be there. I think it's a chance to really elevate, as long as leadership keeps communicating and we pay attention and we do not let marginalized people fall to the wayside, which is why I'm doing the work that I'm doing, which is why we are upskilling entrepreneurs in Nigeria and in Morocco, and why we're working with people that are in Lebanon and in, hopefully in Jordan soon. So I'm excited, and I see it as more door opening. The glass is more half empty than half full for me.
Dr. Kubler, what do you think? Is AI going to make us all more creative and strategic, or is it just going to streamline the labor market? What do you think?
I think the other speakers have done a great job in characterizing the challenges and the opportunities, and I agree with a lot of that. There's a challenging position, I think, when you talk about this, because you can come across as a futurist, which sounds great, or a Luddite, that is afraid of technology. And maybe having a little bit of a balance is both. And a good balance is had by looking at past history, but looking at past history in an empathetic way as well as an empirical way. So, if you look over past history, we really have, especially through technology, improved the condition of humankind. It's true, although sometimes it may not feel like it. Over the past 2 years with growing rampant inflation, which is a very complex factor as to why that's happening, it may not feel like we're all necessarily better off. And if you drive into certain neighborhoods, if you're privileged enough to have concerns about going into those neighborhoods, as some people do, that ought to really tell you there's inequity in your society.
Yes.
And so, if you do the big average and say, well, what is the human condition? And you start looking at individual figures, you can see that, standard of living has improved, access to water has improved, infant mortality has decreased globally, but you can find communities, like I'm from Louisiana, which is way behind the curve, and there's a huge number of people who are very disadvantaged, and that's because of access to opportunity, wealth inequalities, and so on. And the real question is, as this technology emerges, are we going to let companies be the sole deciders as to how that's used? Companies have a fiduciary responsibility to investors. They can have a very long-term view, which has empathy programmed into it that says, I want customers to identify with our product and to not just see we as a firm that looks at a bottom line, but actually thinks about our impact on society. And that can then be a very forward-looking company that strikes a more balanced use of AI that provides a social benefit. But with a more short-term, quarter-to-quarter view, a company can potentially find themselves using AI simply to reduce a workforce or to generate more income. And so I think we as consumers, even, I've talked about us as voters, but we as consumers effectively decide how AI and other socially impactful issues become part of our daily life when we buy a product, and people sometimes eschew buying products from certain companies because they don't like their social profile, and how AI is used, and how much companies give back to a community by being part of these kinds of conversations and supporting, for example, educational development and retraining of workers. That may become part of a company's profile that makes them more attractive for a more socially conscious purchaser, a more socially conscious member of society, who is concerned about both the good and the bad outcomes potentially of AI. I think I am generally optimistic, but I'm mostly optimistic because I get to see a lot of students who have great intellectual curiosity and see AI in different forms and see its potential use, and like to get under the hood and learn how it works, and like to see what the strengths and the limitations are. And sometimes these are the intellectually curious students who say, okay, AI is not a panacea. This other method of doing things is actually better. Or they're willing to say, I have no idea how to solve this problem. AI might be the way to do it. And let me go find collaborators who know how to use this tool and who can help me think about the value propositions that I've mentioned. Could I potentially misuse the tool and maybe mismanage the data and come to erroneous conclusions? So I think some of my optimism derives in part from seeing students who are really interested in what the technology can provide and being part of that curve in a proactive way.
Well, let's talk a little bit about equality and inclusiveness, because one of the things that struck me about this discussion is it mirrors a lot of the discussions that we were having when the internet was emerging, right? I mean, I'm sort of old enough to remember when there was no internet, and people certainly not public facing. How do you get everyone online? And I wonder, in the education space in particular, we talk about how this can be a useful tool for students, but how do we make sure that everybody has access to it in the same way?
I think that's a very fair question. It's one of my concerns as well. I'm concerned that, it kind of further divides the haves from the have-nots. Already, there are statistics out there which showing that of people of the upper echelons, financially, socioeconomically, more than 50% have some degree of awareness, a high level of awareness even of AI. Whereas when you look at the lower socioeconomic areas, we're looking at less than 15% of people having a high level of AI awareness. And so as these new jobs are being created, as these companies are relying more and more on AI, I'm concerned that there's going to be a greater disparity. And so I think the only way to really counteract that is through a purposeful effort toward education at all levels.
Yes.
I think that, what you're doing here, with your organization, I think that's extremely needed. I think, they always say that education is the way out, right? And so whether that means putting AI literacy and digital literacy initiatives in the public libraries, in the elementary schools, kids are interested in this stuff. They want to know how to use this. This is the new shiny tool. And I think we have an opportunity to embrace that and to be able to lift ourselves. But I think it's really important to remember that we are in a bubble here within higher education. And so it is our privilege and responsibility to be able to reach out to everyone, to bring them all in.
I noticed both of you guys nodding. I mean, beyond the higher education bubble, are those concerns that you share as well, Lewis?
Yes, in short, but I think at least at our firm, we do a lot to push the education as well. I mean, there are constant training programs on how to use AI, what new AI features are available across all divisions of our business.
Yeah.
I was fortunate enough to come back to UCF, go Knights, for my
Charge on.
for education in AI, and that was afforded to me by my business. So I think education is at the forefront of everything else.
You work a lot internationally, Melissa. I mean, I wonder if those sort of equity questions kind of span to other countries. I mean, as we embrace AI here in the United States and in Europe, I mean, is there a danger that other places could be left behind? Does it make the world economy less equal, maybe?
I think that it could if we're not vigilant and if we're not paying attention. So I had a call this morning with folks that are in Kenya and in Nigeria that are launching a massive nonprofit to work in some of these Central African countries where, they have to they're going to do this whole program and we're hoping to be partners with them, but we have to have financing to help them have access to the internet for 4 hours because their lights and their power are going to go off and they're on that kind of a tracking. But I think when the haves versus the have-nots, whatever that looks like, wherever that is. I'm thinking, of course, mega corporations, but all of us sitting in the room, we've seen what crowdfunding can do. I'm going to go through this program and I'm going to pay for somebody else, Tom's shoes, that kind of thing. I think when we're paying attention, we're not going to whose ever point was to who we're voting for, who we're buying from. I think that we will not leave them behind because we know what's going on and we're speaking at the highest levels. We're at the UN, we're in Parliament, we're at G8 and everything. But we do have to pay attention because it's not apples to apples. However, there is hope. And I think if we stay vigilant, then then it's actually, again, more opportunity. But we have to understand that the technology that they have access to in Nigeria, even though I have two amazing entrepreneurs that got the deal, beat everybody out because of the program they went through was amazing, but this was brand new to them. Whereas the mom I worked with in California, she also got the job, but it was a lot easier because she had so much more access. So once again, staying on top of looking at it holistically and seeing where can I invest, where can I buy, and where's missing out. That's why we're looking to the Middle East, and we're really looking to make a footprint in Africa with the youth. And I mean, just the population is huge and it's ripe, and they're ready to learn. I think the other piece that I haven't heard talked about a lot is there's still a lot of fear, and we teach the biggest thing is AI is a mindset. It's going to change constantly, and I think if you can just get over that it is a mindset and you've got to constantly learn to get over that fear, even in the lower socioeconomic neighborhoods within the U.S., living through COVID, seeing the fear. I was working for a health organization at the time, the fear of the unknown and the not known, and we saw that with the vaccine and everything. If we're able to just get the messaging to not be afraid and that it's okay to not know yet, that's going to be a huge win for everyone, but especially these areas where they don't have as much yet.
And of course, going back to public policy, you're going to get different regulations, in different laws in different countries governing how AI is rolled out.
And the Middle East, I don't know if you all saw, but Saudi Arabia, just they committed 90 billion with a B, the largest to AI investment. So I think certain regions are going to blow past regulations and just go. So we've got to watch that too. Part of that's exciting, and I want in on that money, but some of it is like super scary as well. So yeah.
Stephen, I'm wondering if you share the concerns that Amanda voiced before in the education field about how you make sure that you maintain that sort of eye on inclusivity in education while utilizing this sort of what is a pretty powerful tool.
Yeah, I do have those concerns, and I think honestly, we don't like to talk about politics, so I won't reference politics and parties explicitly, but we are in a country that tends to focus more on individual effort as opposed to top-down initiatives to raise up populations. I studied German. I lived in Germany. I try to keep up my German. I listen to the German news, and the contrast in how different countries approach things is phenomenal. The European Union is looking significantly at retraining initiatives, at regulation of artificial intelligence. We're only just starting to have those kinds of conversations in the US. There are new regulations coming online in Germany, for example, that companies must produce a product and support its repair for at least 2 or 3 years to get rid of a disposable product economy. And that's thinking about sustainability. So I'm moving over to discussing another technology, but to make the point that different nations and different peoples, and the attitudes of nations are really driven by the people. Different peoples have different approaches to these kinds of problems. And in the US, we do tend to be much more independent, that the individual should, lift themselves up by the proverbial bootstraps. And I think that happens. You can certainly find amazing stories of success. But for every one superstar, that against all odds became, a great success, you can find 9 or more who had, didn't have access to those opportunities, but had all the strengths and all of the potential and all of the drive, but didn't get there. And that's why I say we have to be empathetic and look at real data and understand that success stories that we tend to promote in the United States are great drivers, very great emotive drivers, and they can buoy our spirits and take us forward. But you still have to create luck to some extent and opportunities. And we need to understand that where we see big inequality, it's because we're not making enough opportunity available. The second thing is that I think when, not everyone's going to have perfect opportunity. Sometimes life deals us tough hands, right? And we can all look within ourselves and think about personal challenges that we've had to overcome. We've probably all dealt with some. And, we still have to have that American spirit of personal drive and deal with our own challenges. But we have to keep in mind that the way you overcome challenges is by always having personal drive, intellectual curiosity. One of the speakers talked about not being afraid of AI, and I think part of the way you're not afraid of it or anything else coming online is being a lifelong learner, being interested in constantly learning and challenging yourself. And I think that can often overcome a lot of problems that people have, that students have. When I'm working with students, they can often be very fearful when they hit a general chemistry class or an organic chemistry class. This is hard material, right? And AI is not going to necessarily very easily make your brain understand it better. It's hard work to understand some things, but there is so much enjoyment and so much self-fulfillment that comes from being a lifelong learner, embracing good change, and trying to get a little bit ahead of the curve, educating ourselves. And that creates some of this proverbial opportunity that we value so much in the United States. That is some of that personal opportunity creation that makes success possible, where the individual drives it. And then if we can create structures, educational structures, social structures, where people who are pushing themselves and are driven can then leverage those opportunities and advance, we can really rocket to the top. And we can look around at how other nations have done some of this, and where they've made the right steps or even the missteps. So I think part of all of this discussion needs to be really getting back to cultivating excitement for learning. Right, that can overcome a lot of the fear, and it can really empower young people and even seasoned professionals who are now, faced with the challenge of AI to develop new skills and move into new areas. So really thinking about lifelong learning as the primary opportunity creator to go along with everything that's been said.
I mean, I guess not being afraid of AI is a good idea in principle, right? But I mean, from talking to people in the higher education game, there does seem to be some fear about it because it's so new, and a lot of educators don't really know how to handle this. Higher education institutions, I think, are sort of nationwide worldwide scrambling to figure out how to deal with these challenges. Is there a role, do you think, Amanda, for public policy specifically in terms of education? And how that might help institutions like UCF and others sort of navigate these uncharted waters?
Well, I certainly think prioritizing AI literacy and digital literacy goes a long way.
Yeah.
About 20 years ago, I was involved in a workforce development initiative where Microsoft actually gave a grant to upskill the teachers. And it was at the time $75,000, and that allowed the community college faculty, now called state colleges, from all 28 state colleges here in Florida to attend Microsoft certification training. And the reason they did that was so that ultimately it would trickle down to the students, and we would come out with more students and individuals trained in MCSE and all the different certifications that were coming. And so if public policy is able to manage the purse strings to be able to do something to help in this, I think just prioritizing literacy in this area, starting with the educators, because I think that excitement will trickle down to the students.
It's one of the kind of areas where I guess the educators are learning along with their students at the same time.
Absolutely, which often I think is even more exciting for the students, knowing that everybody's in it together.
I mean, do you find that also in the financial services industry that people are kind of learning as they go along a little bit, Lois? And I mean, with your extensive experience in data analysis and sort of money laundering issues, I mean, do you foresee AI being a useful tool for you guys? I mean, it seems like it might be. Could it also be a force for bad? I mean, can AI be used to create fraud?
Yeah, absolutely create fraud, definitely. I mean, you have bots nowadays that can scam older people because they're not used to the technology. They're not used to the forms in which fraud can be conducted. But I largely think AI will help the financial service industry in catching the bad guys. Again, education. And I think to address the public policy question, having businesses in general that are responsible for hundreds and hundreds of people, it's up to them to promote education. Coupling with UCF, starting at the high school level even to start promoting education in AI and kind of shifting us to more into an engineering style of an economy where people are, if automation does replace tedious jobs, become more specialized. I think that's the way to do it. And I think, again, I hark on this before, but I think institutions like Microsoft and other institutions are promoting that kind of education. So I think we're on a good path.
I think we have time probably maybe for one more. And I wanted to come back to something that we talked about before, which was how to get all those stakeholders together. When it comes to trying to figure out how we can use AI, encourage that sort of collaboration between sectors. How do we do that? I mean, we're sort of in a pretty fraught world at the moment. How do we focus minds and make sure that as a society, as a nation, as a world, we're sort of bringing everyone together to sort of go in the same direction with AI?
Sure.
Melissa,
Well,
what do you
I think, when Sam Altman didn't have a woman on his board, that was super annoying and frustrating. I think the world kind of saw that. And I think that when we start calling out, there's nobody, there's not a person of color, there's not a person, there's nobody,
Yeah.
we're not feeding indigenous languages into the models,
Right.
what's happening here. So I think that we have to speak up with what we're seeing. And if there was a panel here and it was all people that looked like me, that would be a problem. If it was all people that looked like Lewis, it would be a problem. What we're feeding the data is really important, and I think that's something that we don't talk about enough. But it's really important that somebody from Indonesia is feeding stuff into ChatGPT as well as somebody from Alaska and everything, because the data is spitting out what we are telling it. And I go back to the horrid BMI. If any of you have ever been to a doctor's appointment where you get on the scale and you're always flipping obese. I'm 5 foot tall and I can never hit the weight right. That model goes back to eons ago, and it was based off of a very specific, I think, 6 foot tall white guy in Europe or something that I'm never going to be. And so I think being able to call out that those discrepancies really early on is super important. And to the doctor's point earlier about, making sure folks aren't afraid, I just wanted to share our oldest graduate that just went through one of our programs. She's 83 years old and she just finished. So I think that keeping that growth mindset is super important. And yes, it can be hard, but anybody can do it. But I definitely think that we've got to pay attention and look who are in the rooms. And if you're in the room and you notice that everybody looks like you, only you, wake up, bring them to the board meetings, bring them to Congress, bring them to wherever you're at, bring them to the student council, whatever level you're at, because for me, that's the way that we're going to move forward. I think the World Economic Forum this year was the highest percentage. We had 30% women representation, which was the largest we'd ever seen. And it's not good enough, but it's improving. So to me, I go back to that. I'm the non-technical, non-scientific one on the table, but what can I do is I can open my eyes and I can use my big mouth. So.
Yeah. Well, as a white guy from Europe, I can tell you the BMI it also does me no favors either. I think it was you, Dr. Kubler, that had talked about sort of bringing stakeholders together, and I wonder whether you have any thoughts on how we do that, how we sort of keep our shared eye on the ball.
Yeah, I was thinking you might put that question to me, and so I was trying to think of what are the organizations, the institutions that can bring stakeholders together. And I don't want to sound self-serving because I'm in public education, but guess what? I think it's public education. I really don't know of too many institutions that have that capability, but it has to be done cleverly. I think UCF is a great microcosm of how this is happening across the country, but I'm going to give you an example, and this is partly a shout out to Life at UCF. This is an organization of committed lifelong learners who are in the local community whose age ranges, 40s up to 80s and above. These are about 500 people or so that come together once a week for 2 lectures on all kinds of topics. They are engaged. They're paying attention. They're learning what's happening. That's an organization that is, serving stakeholders, and it's connected to the university. And there's incredible symbiosis that happens in that, and students engage. And so you have truly a K through grade opportunity to lift the entire population. That's what public education does. And I'm talking about that as an example of our microcosm here at UCF. But that's happening everywhere across this country. And so what's the takeaway message? I think the takeaway message is public education is not just about getting a degree for a certain amount of money. Public education is about an investment in the nation. When you have an educated population, you create economic opportunity, you create places for industry to thrive, you create circumstances where individuals can fulfill their greatest potential. It's partly public education that created the technologies that allowed us to put a person on the moon and will enable us to do that again and go beyond. It's public education that created some of the more fundamental technologies that led to miraculous cures associated with mRNA vaccines. The list goes on and on and on. And I think we really need to shift our view of public education. Indeed, it has to have value. I'm getting ready to send 2 kids to college pretty soon here. And boy, I'm looking at how costs explode. So we're obviously going to be sensible consumers in which schools we send our kids to and that sort of thing. And we want there to be, good delivery at those places. We want our kids to get through and to come out with a useful degree, but we need to understand that they're going into university as a community where there's committed learners at all ages. And those learners, to your point, are the faculty themselves, who are constantly learning to stay ahead and be leaders in emerging technologies and concepts, to relate those to students who then graduate and take that out into the public sphere to make the nation stronger. So the greatest investment we can have as a nation is public education. And that's a view that we need to sustain the country.
Dr. Pacheco, do you agree? Do you add anything to that?
No, I think that's exactly right. And I can tell you that it's happening already. Actually, April 19th, there is National AI Literacy Day already starting to come, where educators and policymakers and community members are coming together to learn more about AI. Here at UCF, we actually have started Falcon, which is the Florida AI, Florida AI Learning Consortium, where it's actually higher education members from all the different universities and state colleges who are coming together and starting to talk about these kinds of things, including not only how to upskill our students and ourselves, but also the ethics around it and how to, incorporate into the workforce and all of these kinds of issues. And so I think it starts wherever we are. I'm in higher ed, so I'm a part of Falcon, and that's where I'm starting. I think whatever zone that we are in, we can start there. And then I think intentionally bringing in those other players. So being in higher ed, I'm always looking for corporate partners to bring into those conversations, right? And so my hope is that corporate partners in various areas are looking to lean in and bring in as well.
Final word to you, Lois. What do you think?
Yeah, I think just to harken on what I was saying before about the education, coupling with a higher education, it's an absolute must. Keeping everybody ahead of the curve is the name of the game. I think the individuals in schools today are looking forward to the opportunities ahead, and don't be scared of AI, and use it to your advantage. But also, there's a huge benefit kind of going through the grind of learning something kind of manually. So you use it when you can, use it when you need to, and stay optimistic for the future.
Well, it's a really fascinating discussion. I thank you all so much, Dr. Amanda Pacheco, Dr. Stephen Kubler, Lewis Mitchell, and Melissa Stiers. Thank you all so much for being here. I really appreciate it. How about giving a hand for our panelists? Thank you all for coming. Appreciate it.
Can I share one announcement? Tomorrow and Friday, we have a global AI virtual summit, and I have free tickets for all of you. If you would like to see me afterwards, I have a free code. It's from 10 to 3 both days. You can come and go as you want, and it's the VIP ticket. So there's going to be really interesting people from Accenture, Deloitte, the Chopra Foundation. So if you're interested, come and see me for your free global AI summit virtual ticket.
Yeah, that was great. Yeah, that was great.